If you don't know what you did this week or last week, how are you supposed to keep your work aligned with the company's goals? What is micromanagement? Is if I ask, hey, what have you been doing for the last 2 hours? Hey, what have you been doing for the last 2 hours? Hey, what did you get done today? What are you going to do tomorrow? And I create 6 or 7 checkpoints throughout the day where it's just, hey, show me what you're working on. That is micromanagement. And similarly, I think, and this is another one where it's like, oh, the confrontation is not micromanaging, but it feels or seems like it on the surface. I will very often ask somebody, I will ping them middle of the day, be like, hey, at so can you jump on a quick call or a huddle?
Let me invite you to sit back, drop your jaw, tongue, and shoulders. Take a deep breath, and if you wish, close your eyes for a moment and feel the beat within. In a few seconds, you just jumped from your head to your heart and felt the beat within, opening up to receive even more value and fulfillment out of your business and life. And today's episode. I'm your host, Nico van der Venne, confidant to successful CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs who are striving to achieve everlasting fulfillment. Welcome to the Everlasting Fulfillment Podcast with our next guest, Michael Greenberg. Michael, the CEO of Third Brain Auto. He's the digital ops, automation, and AI expert, helping 2 million to 100 million businesses, unlocking explosive growth. Seasoned entrepreneur on a mission. I love this mission. On a mission to empower the next generation of. Welcome to the show, Michael. Tell us who you are and what your magic is.
Nico, first off, thanks for having me on the show.
I am so happy to.
I've been playing the great game of business for a little over a decade now. And everything I launched would hit some sort of roadblock along the way. And normally that happened because of all the constant shifts in people and tools, just breaking apart whatever processes we put together. After years of struggling, I realized that it was the change itself that was causing to pile up this operational debt, and that was really choking our ability to grow in the way I wanted to. So I dove deep into figuring out how I could create the right sort of technology to fuse with our operations. Around the same time, ChatGPT launched and everything clicked. AI plus operations was the breakthrough. And that's how Third Brain was born, integrating people, processes, and technology to build unstoppable operational leverage instead of drowning in debt.
That's a short story of really explaining what you do.
Thanks.
Who are you behind that? Because the brain behind that is a different person, I think.
Oh, absolutely. So I am the first brain, so to speak. And personally, my background is entrepreneurs on both sides of the family. I grew up getting told, hey, don't run your own business. Don't work for yourself. Go be a professional. Go get that white collar job, make a stable living, and just run on that.
Mm-hmm.
Did the opposite, dropped out of school, went to a coding boot camp, joined a startup, raised some money, figured out what I was good at, what I wasn't so good at in the process, and ended up building my first company in podcast production. Sold that just about 5 years ago now. Spent about 7-8 years building that thing up. And when I sold it, I made enough that I could take a step back. But at that point, just like the story of the business, I knew that I wasn't getting to the level that I wanted to get to. So I took a break. I went and worked for somebody else, somebody way more successful than me. And he showed me what it looks like to actually be inside of a business to some extent. that gave me the opportunity to learn a little bit more about myself and find my zone of genius and realize that it was that overlap of technology and business that I could really master and call my own.
But that's a beautiful step right there. You're saying you took a step back, but it's when you have a bow, and I don't mean the bow with your neck. I really mean a bow indeed with an arrow. It's like you pulled yourself back, but it was not eased down. It was like strengthening yourself to launch your arrow in that right direction, what you call your zone of genius. Would you call yourself a high achiever?
Whew. Statistically, I have achieved beyond the average. I'm not sure I've aimed higher than most other people, but I was definitely better understanding of the work required to get there. So I guess I am a high achiever in practice, if not in planning. I was certainly never a straight A student or anything like that.
But the funny thing that I found with talking to all the C-levels and founders on this podcast is most of them never were. Most of the people were either they just ended high school or they went to college but dropped out and started something. And you take the story from a completely different angle because you have to. There's no easy way. You have to. And like you said, the white collar, blue collar even, those are routes that will nicely, let's say it's a yellow brick road almost, but with a couple of bumps on the way because you're limited to what you're able to do in those roles. But if you would say one thing that you need to go where you've been at this point, what would be that one thing?
Got to show up every day. I talk about this with the apprentices that we have often, and it's not about actually doing great things every day. It's really, and some of them get it, some of them don't, but it's really just you show up 5 days a week, you work. You don't have to work 8 hours a day. You put in 4, you put in 6 hours, but you show up every day and you put in those hours and you clock in and you do things and then you clock out again and you're going to do it again tomorrow. That's it.
Is there a word that you could put on that?
Grit.
Love that. Yes. It's one of the words that I've been carrying around for a long time. Yes, absolutely. Grit. Every day, just keep on going. And I might fill that with another word, consistency, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Every day being there, not moving mountains, but moving a rock or a pebble. How have you been achieving that? Let's talk rocks first and then pebbles later. How have you been doing that? Because I know I've been on a lot of your content and you've got amazing stuff out there where a lot of people could learn a lot of stuff, but they need to take the time, of course, to read it. And like that, be a little bit bigger. But how do you tackle that, the rocks and the stone?
You break rocks down into pebbles. I think this really all goes back to the same sort of thing. If I know I want to build $1 million a year business, in order to build $1 million a year business, how many clients am I going to need? Okay, what's my conversion rate from when I have a first meeting with a potential client to when they close? Okay, so now how many meetings do I have to have in order to close enough clients that I could make the $1 million? Okay, then what do I do to make a meeting? I send 1,000 Twitter DMs. Okay, so let's say every 1,000 Twitter DMs is one meeting and I want to make 100 meetings. I've got to send 100,000 Twitter DMs, or I've got to pay somebody to do that.
Of course. Yeah, I love the statement. How do you eat an elephant? Spoon by spoon. Indeed. Yeah, it's the only way to actually do these things. I remember because you mentioned your podcast editing business. These days, I think if you would have had that business these days, you'd be out of it really quickly because there's so many tools out there that help a podcaster do almost everything themselves. I do just, I mean, the perfect example of that. I've got, what's it called? Devi or something. No, remember the name that I use. It's one of those tools.
Descript.
Yes, that's the one. Absolutely. But yeah, I started using that. Somebody recommended it to me. First, I did it myself. I opened up DaVinci Resolve. It's like a humongous system just to do a podcast editing because it's just left over with the audio sound and sometimes with the video. But these things are just remove all, what do you call it? Repeating words, stuff like that. And it does it so well that I was baffled the first time I used it. Did you predict anything like this when you stopped your business or anything like that?
We used Descript in its very earliest forms, and we used it because it improved our workflow. It was part of how we had an operational advantage over competitors.
How did you find, where did you find Descript? Because it's something
that's my job.
Sorry?
It's my job. That's right. That's my passion. That's my job. I know every tool. I try every tool. When you hear about a tool, I heard about it a week ago and I was in the beta 3 months ago. And I played around and I was not impressed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it's, really your through and through passion to get these things into your head and understand what their added value is. That's how you choose.
We found out that Descript could take the time that an editor needed to spend and reduce it by 20, 30%. Mm-hmm. And we had to teach the editor how to use Descript, the less complex tool, but it sped up the workflow so much it was worth the effort. And so they'd use Descript and then they'd switch back over to like Audacity or Premiere Pro, one of the other professional tools.
Yeah, it's like you said, AI came in and it's been high speed ever since for those who started to understand it and started to learn to work with it as well. Because for me, I've been in IT for 15 years, so I know what programming is. And I used to be in infrastructure, so I'm not really the programming kind of IT guy. I was in support, but I do understand applications and how users use applications. And you go from there and then you start thinking, okay, this is a system that needs a concrete explanation of you need to act like this and you need to do this. And I'll give you this resource to have you act on it. So if you look at what you've been doing right now, what's your greatest desire from this point? What's your greatest desire?
I think I'm going to have to choose immortality, just flat out denial of death.
Okay.
I think if we're going with what would I like most in the world, it's to pause the clock permanently.
Okay. It's a great idea.
Thanks. I'm guessing you've not had somebody answer that one before.
No, I have not. No. But one question I do have, if you say stop time, let's go metaphysical here. Last time I was researching this, I love researching time because to me, time does not exist. It's a human construct. So it's just, we have moments that follow each other. It's not time.
Yeah.
And you have choices that follow each other. Like I could just stand up right now and move out of this room and say, Michael, you can just keep talking in my podcast and go right ahead. That's a choice. When I could stay here and sit here, that's a choice as well. So for me, it's all about choices and time does not exist. But if we go into time, and sorry, people, this is going to be a different angle, but last thing I heard was like, if we would stop time, there would be only darkness.
Yeah, I don't want to stop time. I just want to stop my aging.
Okay.
I want to pause my clock.
Oh, yeah, okay. Much more personal. Okay.
Yeah.
What have you done to work towards that? Because if it's a desire.
I eat a bit healthier, take a few things. I'm thinking I'm going to do one of those executive retreats next year. I get the 360 medical. I'm a little too young to start doing like stem cells and some of the other really higher end preventative treatments. But There's plenty of other additional supplements and things you can take to help reduce the speed of aging, that sort of thing.
So it's more on the physical side that you've been orienting towards that staying young. What have you been doing mentally for that?
I don't have a mental problem with my age. I'm operating under the model of age as like disease. So I want to lengthen my telomere. Right. I like there are specific biomarkers that I can turn back as a result. Yeah, I don't feel or think any differently. I'm definitely wiser, but I don't think my brain is fundamentally a different brain than it was 10 years ago.
It's an intriguing answer that you brought.
Thanks.
While you were thinking or working on that, what did you hate most on that level?
I was working on
Achieving immortality. Let's go for that one.
I don't quite understand the question.
So while you were working towards it, looking for what you need to do to keep yourself, your physical body young, let's say that, what are the things that you hated that you find out that you hated that you said, oh my God, this should not be possible. Or this is something that I do not want to go into or.
Yeah. I found out that you have to eat a balanced diet all the time. And I'm not sure if that's a hate, but it's definitely a whole lot more work than they tell you. I'd say that's probably the most annoying of the things related to that at this point. I'm sure there will be much worse ones in time, but like being strict about diet is just always a lot of work.
Can you give me an example of what might be different than what you did before?
Yeah, so like I avoid a lot more foods that have high levels of plastics and pesticides, buy a lot more organic items, don't eat like high fructose corn syrup. And so that means there's 20 products out of 21 products on the shelf in most categories are no longer available. But it's just little stuff like that. Or like just trying to eat whole foods is actually quite a bit of planning and work if you don't know which brands you can and cannot buy already.
Do you have anybody who's guiding you on that?
No, I just read the backs of boxes.
Well, that's a big thing. That's what most people don't even do. They just go to the grocery store, pick up a couple of things, and they don't even read what's on the back. My partner, she actually has this app where she looks up on all the E's and whatever, because not all of the things are bad, of course, but she has this app and she looks at it and then says, okay, good, or that's not good. Or we compensate and say, okay, it's not good, not bad either. So we'll just eat it. But I think there's also a big difference between what's served here in Europe again towards what's served in the US. That's what I hear and understand.
Oh, no, there is. There's a significant, to pick a very specific example that I know is very common, bread. So like I make all my own bread at home. I make it with organic flour because in the US, any non-organic flour is sprayed with glyphosate, which is fairly neurotoxic. And I'm not a fan of eating more of it than I have to. So I get the organic flour, I make my own bread, and I make my bread from a sourdough starter. So I ferment all of my dough, which is how you would get like the majority of your dough or bread in Europe is going to be a traditional sourdough from a bakery. It's much less often that they use an instant yeast or a beer yeast because the quality of the product is so much worse when you use those things.
Indeed. Yeah, it's a kind of a pity, I find, that a lot of these things which are for us really standard are for you guys a very big challenge. Because I been a while, but I was in New York for a while on business, and I lived in an apartment. So I, of course, needed to find food. And I've told this story before on the podcast, but I went into one of the supermarkets, finally found one. That was the beginning. Finally found one. It was one of those places where you had to go into the basement because I lived close in that. And I went in and I said, okay, this is finally, I'm going to have my meat, vegetables, and potatoes. I was so happy. I'm a farmer's boy, so that's the whole point. Went inside, looked at the greenery stand, and I saw a salad. And I said, okay, let me get a salad. And I grabbed the salad and I went straight through the salad with my hand. It was just, it felt like paper. I was like, what's this? This is not what I'm used to. And then I moved on to other things, and it went from bad to worse. And in the end, I went to a restaurant and had dinner there because I didn't find anything in that supermarket. And I was really astonished because that's one of the reasons why I left after 2 weeks. I couldn't find the food that I wanted to eat. Everything was processed, or a vendor on the street, or a deli where the grease was floating on top of everything. I did not get it. And coming home, the first thing I did, I went to a restaurant here and we had spare ribs, really pork spare ribs. Yeah. And they were only this big. When I looked at that in New York, they were like meaty and very big, and so all overdone in hormones and stuff like that. This is such a difference. Why is this the case? But I'm digressing very far from the essence of the podcast. But I find it it's astonishing to me how this can exist, let's say. But I am so happy that you found your way in that. So would that be something that you would also link to your goals, your desires to become or to be a high achiever and make your business a success? Is that?
Oh, yeah. I think what you eat fuels you. And I know I am not the healthiest I could be, but I know that I am significantly healthier than the average, at least in the US. And I don't have any long-term conditions. I don't have to take any pills. I keep it that way because I eat things that are real food.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can confirm that. Yeah. I think there's a lot of people out there who might be looking at it like, what are you talking about this time? But I think it's one of the basics as an entrepreneur. Your body is the thing that you use to create business, and your mind is in your body. So I think the basic stuff is get your body healthy and your mind healthy, and you'll have a healthy business. It's a start. There's other parts there as well. Yeah. What would be something that you personally see with the people that you surround yourself with is like a common denominator between them as being successful entrepreneur?
Adaptability, the ability to change and grow to fit the situation. I think we see that a lot internally. Like, the first thing a new hire goes through with us is what we call the crucible. And it's a self-directed learning exercise. It takes a few weeks and it teaches you like automation and AI and all sorts of other things. And so it requires you to do a lot of reading and a lot of note-taking and a lot of learning on your own. And then you're going to be assigned a project or two that's based on that stuff. And then everything you do afterwards is going to reference back to that initial stuff and to some of the like thought pieces you read during that time. And you can tell who's picking it up, who's really enjoying it and getting ahead, who's not. And then directly afterwards, if I reference something from your training 2-3 weeks in, you should know that I'm making a reference to the documents that we talked about then. If you miss it, that's a red flag. If you miss it several times and then make some mistakes based on not understanding those principles, that's the end, because it says, this person does not understand how to adapt to the context of our work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I see what you apply there and what you're going for, because it's something that a lot of companies skip, in essence, the basic foundation of good knowledge of how your business works, but not only, of course, business-wise, but the technology and all the steps and the standard operating procedures you've created and so on. But it's not, you can know a lot, but you can understand a lot. And there's a big difference between those two.
Exactly. And just regurgitation is not the person I need to hire, because if you don't understand, why would I choose you over an AI?
Yeah.
Now more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a team member called Luna, and it's ChatGPT. I've integrated her into my business, and it is a reference case. I do a lot of stuff with her. And of course, you have to. That's one thing that I do. I have learned is that it's not because you're using AI that you can blindly follow it. There is this discrepancy there. You need to know your stuff while you're using AI. It's not that you can blindly jump in because you have a lot of ghost stuff that could exist in AI as well. It just blabbles around. But if you realize that,
Absolutely.
it helps you very quickly.
Yeah. AI is the best intern I've ever had. And your ability to use AI to perform a task is directly related to your ability to communicate at a very high, very detailed level about that task. And so if you can't get the AI to do it, but somebody else can, it's probably because you're a bad communicator.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned communication because the last couple of weeks, one thing that I've noticed is that basic fundamental of communication, and I really mean that in a human way, is a big problem in a lot of businesses because there's a lot of stuff that's being hidden in communication instead of bringing it out. Yeah, I don't know what your experience with that is. Been leader to a lot of people, so how does that tackle in your business?
Oh, I think it comes up a lot. I'm just thinking of a specific example right now. We've got a team member who was hired about 3 months ago. He went through the crucible with 3 other people, and he lagged a little bit during that. You could tell he was having sort of trouble adapting to the technology, but very strong track record. We powered on regardless. As he's now started to settle in a little more into parts of his role, it's clear that he doesn't have the same cultural expectation of effort as we do in the company. That makes sense. It's like,
Yeah.
what I expect you to get done in 4 hours and what you get done in 4 hours do not line up. And they aren't even playing the same game. And so when something like that comes up, it's what did we miss in the process? And then it boiled up. Oh, the person who did the 3rd round interview. Yeah, he's surprised that we decided to hire this guy. Why didn't you bring that up then? Oh, because you were so excited about this, and so you glossed over this other thing. Oh, this is a failure of our hiring process in many ways to pick this up. And we'll solve for it next time.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you did. Yeah. Within the work that you do right now, you do a lot of remote work, if I understand.
Almost
Not really.
exclusively. Yeah.
So there's a lot of people working from home, they're not really in an office and so on. Have you ever had issues where you went into micromanagements because they work remote, expectations and stuff like that?
So I've spent almost my whole career remote. So any micromanagement I do is not a result of being remote, just me being a bad manager. And the answer there is absolutely yes.
How does this manifest? Now I'm curious. How does that manifest?
Yeah, I think it breaks down in one of 2 ways. So first, actually, I'm going to explain what I don't think is micromanagement, but looks like it on the surface and feels like it to some people. And that's asking for an hours audit. If I ask you, hey, what did you do today? Or how did you spend your day yesterday? Or how did you spend your day this week? I don't expect somebody to be able to say from 11:15 to 11:22, I answered emails. And then from 11:23. But I do expect them to be able to say, hey, on Monday, I spent the first half of the day dealing with this and this thing. And then I spent the second half of the day doing this. And then on Tuesday, I was in these meetings for 4 hours, and then I knocked out these 2 other tasks. And so there is a track record. There's artifacts of work being done. And there's a way to describe it in which you can say, hey, this is what I did over this time period. If you are unable to do that, you are failing in your job, in my mind, because if you don't know what you did this week or last week, how are you supposed to keep your work aligned with the company's goals?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it. No, that's not micromanagement at all.
But what is micromanagement is if I ask, hey, what have you been doing for the last 2 hours? Hey, what have you been doing for the last 2 hours? Hey, what did you get done today? What are you going to do tomorrow? And I create 6 or 7 checkpoints throughout the day where it's just, hey, show me what you're working on. That is micromanagement. And similarly, I think, and this is another one where it's like, oh, the confrontation is not micromanaging, but it feels or seems like it on the surface. I will very often ask somebody, I will ping them middle of the day, be like, hey, at so can you jump on a quick call or a huddle? I just want to check in. First off, how quickly do they respond to that? That's a sign of, are they actually at their desk during hours? If it takes them 15 minutes, sure, whatever. They were getting a coffee. That's fine. 2 hours later?
Yeah. No, there's something wrong there.
Yeah. And then similarly, we get on the call. I ask, hey, what are you working on? And then you say, oh, I've been working on writing some newsletters. I'm going to ask to see those newsletters. And be like, hey, show me what you're working on then. Okay, pull it up. If you pull up at one paragraph, that's not it.
No.
And on the surface, this would feel like micromanagement, I think. It certainly does to me when I describe it outside of the context.
Yeah.
But there's a reason why you do something like that. And that sort of particular action occurs because I think, oh, this person isn't doing anything for 3/4 of their day.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find out.
But is this something that you do at the start of when somebody starts working with you? Or is it something where it gets suspicious of the outcome or the results they bring on the table?
Both. So I want to do it at the start to set an understanding that these are expectations, that you are expected to be available during the day and to be available fairly quickly. That if somebody asks you, hey, what did you do this week? You are able to say, if I want to know, like, how busy are you right now? You should be able to give me a legitimate answer, not say, oh, I am busy. I don't have time for more work. That's a lie. So I think there's part of that there. And so there's an expectation setting piece, but anyone who's worked in a freelance role or an hourly role or anything like that, none of this would be new or odd. And like my company runs on hours. That's fundamentally, we sell half and whole equivalent like contracts to customers. If a customer says, hey, you didn't do the work, we're going to go back to the hours at the end.
Of course.
And I track my hours just like anyone else on the team. I expect that from everyone.
Okay. Is that so? When you look at your business from a manager or founder's point of view, is all the information that comes to you, are you absolutely sure that everything is legit in a way where there's no Excel sheet management? You have a middle management, if I understand.
Yeah. Legit in the sense, like, if they say we produced 10 widgets, did we produce 10 widgets?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I know those numbers are accurate. I also know that if I ask, what does our sales pipeline look like right now? Those numbers will not be accurate.
Okay. But there's probably a reason for that.
It's because I have team members who don't want to disqualify leads based on time because they like a good looking, nice fat pipeline. And just because Sally didn't respond for 30 days, I don't think she should be in there anymore.
Yeah. It's an approach. And indeed, when it comes down to the human contact or the human processes, I think there's no way of numbering everything just blindly and saying so many days you're out. That's true. So yeah, if the rest of the processes are very clear to you, then indeed that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Yeah, absolutely. Have you ever heard of the two terms CEO disease and founder syndrome?
CEO disease and founderism?
Founder syndrome.
Founder syndrome. Founder syndrome, I think I've heard of before. Okay. CEO disease, I have not. And I do not know what founder syndrome is, if that was the next question.
Yeah,
I think I've just heard of it. Somebody smart brought it up to me once, but I'm not quite sure who.
Thanks for the compliment, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically something that is happening a lot in business these days, is where a founder, for instance, really gets engroined and their business is their baby. And they hire people to do stuff because they notice that they don't have enough time. But while they're hiring them, they're not having them use their expertise in their business. Is that something that happened for you?
So like I, as the founder, stopped using my expertise in the business because I hired other people? Oh, yes, absolutely. But I like to think of it as I hired that person to replace whatever I used to be doing, and then they failed to pick it up properly.
Is that
it's important to shift the blame away from myself onto my subordinates? I think that's a really important part of management.
Yeah.
Because I can never be at fault. Only my team.
Are you going to tell them that next week?
I tell them when they start, it's rule 0 of operational excellence. Michael is always right.
I think you really need one of those pills for the founder syndrome. If you say that.
If only it was just a pill.
It's true. It's true. Have you ever noticed somebody really acting like that when in your environment?
Oh, yeah. I probably did that when I was first starting out 10 years ago and I was a brand new manager.
What changed? What's the change there?
Me? I'm not 20 years old any longer. That certainly helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I have a fully developed brain.
But is there something that really created the mind switch in your side?
No, I think I just got better at it over time because I wanted to make money, and I knew that fundamentally I had to care about these people more if I wanted them to stay longer so that way I could make more money. And I think that last bit, the making more money part, really makes it easier to like tolerate people.
Okay. It's an interesting point of view. Because
why should I have to like everyone I hire?
No, that's absolutely true. There's no rule for that. At some point, you hire people because of their knowledge and their expertise and not for their character or something like that. On the other side, if you have a team where there's somebody that's a know-it-all, and let's put a director at all would be somebody who messes everything up by their attitude, I think that would stop the story as well. But indeed, it's not, you don't hire only for that. Absolutely. So from your experience, I would love to hear a recommendation for, let's say, the younger starting leaders out there. What's something that you really would put out there, help them achieve what they desire?
Show up every day, get a little better every day, and yes, that includes weekends.
Indeed. Love the last one, Biden. I love that one. There's no 9 to 5. There is no 5 days a week. There is 7 days a week. There's 24/7. Yeah, that's the only way you can get better. Absolutely. I 100%, 1,000% agree. That's the reality. Thank you for that, Mike.
Thank you.
It's been a very interesting conversation. We've been in a lot of different places, I must say. Where can people find you, and how can they follow you?
Yeah. So you can find me at thirdbrain.co or gentoftech.com. And then you can find me at gentoftech, GENTOFTECH, on all the social media that I exist on.
I will add that to the show notes in any case. And I really want to thank you for your time, Michael. I know you have a very busy schedule, and I'm really happy we had this chat.
Likewise, Nico. Thank you for having me on.
I'm really happy. This has been a wonderful conversation. Going in all directions. I just love it. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And to our listeners, thank you very much for listening again to an episode of the Everlasting Podcast. And remember, jump from head to heart. Feel the beat within. Have a great one. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Everlasting Podcast. Let me leave you with a few questions to answer in the comments. How do you see the different topics we discussed during this interview? What are your thoughts? What stood out for you? Let us know in the comments or just send us your feedback. We launch new episodes weekly. Don't miss any by ensuring you are subscribed to the show. Click the follow button now. We depend on the organic growth of the podcast to inspire more and more people. So by giving us a 5-star review and sharing this episode with at least one of your friends who might be interested in the subject, you will significantly help more people become inspired. But more than anything, I am grateful to you for taking the time to listen to the show. If you are also a successful CEO, founder, or entrepreneur who has inspiring words to say, feel free to contact us for an interview at contact@nicovandevenne.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you again soon with more inspirational conversations on achieving everlasting fulfillment.